The moment Margot Daniels heard her father say she was nothing more than a burden to be sold, something inside her chest crumbled like sun-dried clay. She stood outside the parlor window of their modest ranch house in southern New Mexico territory, the autumn wind of 1878 carrying his words straight to her ears with cruel clarity. "She's 20 years old and still unmarried," her father complained to whoever was inside. "Eats my food, uses my resources, and what do I get in return? A daughter who cannot even attract a proper husband. At least if I arrange something with Patterson, I will get some compensation for all these wasted years." Margot pressed her back against the adobe wall, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Gerald Patterson was 53, twice widowed, and known for his mean temper and heavy drinking. Her father wanted to sell her to that man like livestock at auction. She had always known her father did not love her. After her mother died bringing her into the world, he had made it clear through 2 decades of cold indifference that Margot represented nothing but loss to him. But hearing it spoken so plainly, hearing herself reduced to a transaction, a burden, something worthless except for whatever price she might fetch, that cut deeper than any previous slight. The evening sun painted the desert landscape in shades of amber and rust as Margot walked away from the house. She did not run. She did not cry. She simply moved forward, one foot in front of the other, following the dusty road that led away from the only home she had ever known. Her practical brown dress offered little protection against the cooling air, and she had no supplies, no money, no plan. But she could not stay. She would not become Gerald Patterson's third wife, would not let her father profit from her misery. By the time true darkness fell, Margot had put several miles between herself and her father's ranch. The desert night brought sounds that made her pulse quicken, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of creatures she could not name. Her feet ached in her worn boots, and thirst had begun to scratch at her throat. Still, she walked on, guided by moonlight and stubborn determination. She did not hear the riders until they were almost upon her. 3 men on horseback materialized from the darkness like specters, their faces hidden by shadow and hat brims. Margot froze, every muscle in her body tensing with primal fear. "Well, what do we have here?" one of them said, his voice rough as gravel. "A little lost lamb wandering all alone." "Please," Margot said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I am just passing through. I mean no trouble." "No trouble." Another man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Girl, you are in trouble. This here is dangerous country for a woman alone." The third rider nudged his horse closer, and in the pale moonlight, Margot could see the cruel twist of his smile. "Maybe we should offer her protection. For a price." Margot turned to run, but she knew it was futile. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no shelter, no salvation. She heard the horses moving behind her, heard the men laughing at her pathetic attempt at escape. Then another sound cut through the night, the sharp crack of a rifle shot that sent the sand near the horses' hooves exploding upward. The animals reared and whinnied, and the men cursed loudly. "The lady does not appear to want your company," a new voice called out, deep and commanding. "I suggest you ride on. This is not your concern, stranger," one of the original men shouted back. "I am making it my concern. You have 3 seconds to turn those horses around." Margot could not see the newcomer clearly, just a silhouette atop a large horse on a nearby ridge. But something in his voice, in the absolute certainty of his tone, made her believe he would follow through on his implied threat. The 3 men apparently believed it too. After a tense moment of silence, they wheeled their horses around and galloped off into the darkness, their retreat accompanied by muttered threats and curses. The stranger approached slowly, and as he drew closer, Margot could make out more details. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the practical clothing of a working rancher, denim and leather worn soft by use. A rifle rested across his saddle, and even in the poor light, she could see the competent way he handled both weapon and horse. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now but still carrying that undertone of authority. "No," Margot managed. "Thank you. You saved me." "What are you doing out here alone?" He dismounted, moving with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. "Nearest town is 8 miles back, and there is nothing but open range for 20 miles ahead." "I was leaving," Margot said simply. "I could not stay where I was." Something in her voice must have conveyed the desperation behind those words because the man did not press for details. Instead, he studied her for a long moment, and Margot found herself wishing she could see his face more clearly. "I am Yates Kellerman," he said finally. "I have a ranch about 5 miles south of here. You are welcome to shelter there for the night, get some food and water. In the morning, if you want, I can take you into town." Margot knew she should be wary. She did not know this man. For all she knew, he could be as dangerous as the 3 who had just fled. But something in his voice, in the respectful distance he maintained, in the straightforward way he made his offer, made her trust him. "Margot Daniels," she replied. "And yes, please, I would be grateful." Yates offered her his horse, insisting he would walk alongside. Margot was too exhausted to argue. She pulled herself into the saddle, feeling the animal's warmth beneath her, and they began moving through the darkness. "Those men," Yates said after a while. "They have been causing trouble in the area for weeks. Drifters, most likely, living rough and preying on anyone they think is vulnerable. You were lucky I was checking my fence lines this evening." "Lucky," Margot repeated softly. "Yes, I suppose I was." They walked in silence for a while, and Margot found her thoughts drifting. Everything that had happened today felt surreal. Learning of her father's plans, running away, nearly being attacked, and now riding through the desert night with a stranger who had appeared like something out of a dime novel. She should have been terrified, but instead she felt oddly calm, as if she had stepped outside her normal life and into something entirely different. "Here," Yates said eventually, and Margot looked up to see buildings taking shape in the darkness. A ranch house, larger than her father's, constructed of solid timber and stone. Outbuildings that spoke of a prosperous operation. Corrals that even in the darkness she could see were well maintained. Yates helped her down from the horse, his hand steadying her when she stumbled slightly on tired legs. "Come inside. I will get you something to eat." The interior of the ranch house surprised her. She had expected the typical bachelor quarters, sparse and utilitarian. Instead, she found a home that was clearly lived in and cared for, furniture that showed quality craftsmanship, books on shelves, curtains on the windows, small touches that spoke of someone who valued comfort and beauty. "My mother's influence," Yates said, noticing her surprise. He had removed his hat, and Margot could finally see him properly in the lamplight. He was younger than she had expected, probably no more than 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. A strong face, weathered by sun and wind, with the kind of quiet strength that came from hard work and self-reliance. "She passed 5 years ago, but I have tried to keep the place the way she liked it." He moved around the kitchen with easy familiarity, putting coffee on to boil, setting out bread and cold meat and cheese. Margot sat at the wooden table, watching him, feeling like she had stumbled into some strange dream. "You do not have to tell me your story," Yates said as he placed food in front of her. "But if you want to talk, I am willing to listen." Margot picked up a piece of bread, suddenly ravenous. She ate several bites before speaking, gathering her thoughts. There was something about this man, about the quiet way he moved, the gentle tone of his voice that made her want to trust him. "My father," she said finally, "is planning to marry me off to a man I cannot stand. For money. He told someone today that I was a burden, that at least this way he would get compensation for having to raise me. So I left." Yates poured coffee into 2 tin cups, his expression neutral but his eyes showing understanding. "That must have hurt to hear." "It did," Margot admitted. "But it also was not entirely surprising. My father has never hidden his resentment of me. My mother died when I was born, and he has blamed me for her loss ever since. I have spent 20 years trying to earn his approval, his affection, anything. And I finally realized tonight that it will never come. I will never be anything but a burden to him, a reminder of what he lost. No matter what I do, I will never be someone he treasures or values or even likes." The words tumbled out, 20 years of loneliness and rejection crystallizing into confession. Margot felt her eyes burning but refused to let tears fall. She had cried enough over her father's coldness. "That is his failing, not yours," Yates said quietly. He sat down across from her, cradling his coffee cup in work-roughened hands. "A man who cannot see the value in his own child, that is a poverty of spirit that has nothing to do with you." Margot looked up at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "You do not even know me." "I might actually be everything he says, worthless, a burden. I know that you had the courage to walk away from a bad situation, even though you had nowhere to go and no resources. I know that you kept your head when those men approached you. I know that you are sitting here having a conversation with a stranger instead of falling apart, even though your whole world just turned upside down. Those things tell me plenty about your character." Something in Margot's chest loosened. A knot she had not even realized was there beginning to unravel. No one had ever spoken to her that way before, with respect, with recognition of her strength rather than focus on her supposed failings. "What will you do?" Yates asked. "Do you have family elsewhere? Friends who might take you in?" Margot shook her head. "No family. And my father isolated me from making close friends. He said it was not proper for an unmarried woman to be too social. I think he was afraid someone might want to actually marry me, and he would lose his unpaid help." Yates frowned at that but did not comment directly. Instead, he said, "There are options. The town of Truth or Consequences is not large, but there are families there who might need help. Cooking, cleaning, child-minding. Or you could head to one of the larger towns, Las Cruces or Santa Fe, where there would be more opportunities." Margot nodded slowly, trying to envision a future that did not include her father's ranch, trying to imagine herself working for strangers, building a new life from nothing. It should have been terrifying, and part of it was. But there was also a strange excitement threading through her fear. For the first time in her life, her future was her own to determine. "For tonight you should rest," Yates continued. "You can have my room. I will sleep in the spare room." "I cannot take your room," Margot protested. "You can and you will. It is the most comfortable bed, and after everything you have been through today, you need good rest." His tone brooked no argument. Margot was too tired to fight him on it. She followed him down a short hallway to a bedroom that was as thoughtfully furnished as the rest of the house. A wide bed with a thick quilt, a washstand with fresh water in the pitcher, even wildflowers in a jar on the dresser, though they were beginning to wilt. "I will wake you in the morning," Yates said from the doorway. "Sleep as long as you need." After he left, Margot washed her face and hands, then collapsed onto the bed still fully clothed. The mattress was more comfortable than anything she had ever slept on, and the sheets smelled like sun and sage. Despite everything, Despite the chaos of the day, despite the uncertainty of her future, she fell asleep within minutes. She woke to morning sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of cooking bacon. For a disoriented moment, she could not remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, her father's words, her flight, the men in the darkness. Yates Kellerman appearing like some frontier guardian angel. Margot sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair. She used the water in the pitcher to wash more thoroughly, wishing desperately for clean clothes. Her dress was dusty and wrinkled from travel and sleep, but there was nothing to be done about it. She found Yates in the kitchen, cooking breakfast with the same easy competence he seemed to bring to everything. He looked up when she entered and smiled, a quick flash of warmth that transformed his serious face. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Margot admitted. "Thank you again for your kindness. You did not have to help me." "Of course I did," Yates said, as if there had never been any question. "What kind of man would I be if I left someone in need?" He served breakfast, eggs and bacon and biscuits that were surprisingly good. They ate together in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Yates spoke again. "I have been thinking about your situation. If you want, you could stay here for a while. Work for me, I mean. I could use help around the ranch. Cooking, mending, general housekeeping. The pay would not be much, but it would give you room and board and time to figure out your next step without pressure." Margot stared at him, her fork halfway to her mouth. "You are offering me a job. You do not even know if I can cook or clean properly." "Can you?" Yates asked simply. "Yes, I have been running my father's household since I was 12. Then there is your answer. Look, I know it is strange me offering like this, but the truth is I really could use the help. This place is too big for one person to manage the house and the ranch work, and it seems like it might be a solution that helps us both." Margot set down her fork, her mind racing. It was an unconventional arrangement, certainly. A single woman living on a ranch with a single man would cause talk. But what other option did she have? She could go to town and hope someone needed domestic help, but that was uncertain. This was a concrete offer, a way to support herself while she figured out her future. "People will talk," she said quietly. "Let them talk. Anyone who knows me knows I run an honest operation, and anyone who meets you will see that you are a respectable woman. Besides, this is the territory. People are more practical out here, less worried about Eastern social rules." He had a point. The frontier demanded a certain flexibility in social conventions, born of necessity and the reality of harsh living conditions. "All right," Margot said finally. "I accept, but I insist on earning my keep properly. You are already being far too generous." Yates's smile returned, broader this time. "Trust me, after a few days of washing my work clothes and trying to make sense of my pantry, you will feel like you are earning every penny." That first day set the pattern for the days that followed. Yates showed Margot around the ranch, introducing her to his operation. He ran cattle, about 200 head, and bred horses. He employed 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, older men who treated Margot with gruff courtesy and seemed to accept her presence without question. Margot threw herself into the work of managing the household. The ranch house, while well built, had clearly been neglected in the details. Dust had accumulated in corners. Mending had piled up. The pantry was disorganized and understocked with anything that required actual cooking skill. She cleaned and organized, mended clothes and linens, and began cooking proper meals. The ranch hands were thrilled with the change, having subsisted on Yates's limited repertoire of simple dishes. Margot found herself taking pride in the transformation, in the way the house began to feel more like a real home. Yates proved to be an ideal employer, respectful, appreciative, never making her feel uncomfortable or threatened. He worked long hours on the ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning after sunset. But in the evenings, they would share supper and conversation, and Margot found herself looking forward to these times more than she wanted to admit. He was different from any man she had known. Her father had been cold and distant. The few men who had shown interest in courting her had been awkward or presumptuous, but Yates was neither distant nor presumptuous. He was simply present, fully engaged when they talked, asking about her thoughts and opinions as if they mattered, sharing his own views with an openness that suggested he valued her perspective. They talked about everything: books they had read, the ranch and its rhythms, the territory and its future, their pasts and their hopes. Margot learned that Yates had inherited the ranch from his father, who had died shortly after his mother, that he had built it up from a struggling operation to something profitable through sheer determination and intelligent management, that he loved this land with a fierce passion that showed in everything he did. "I know it is not much," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in impossible colors, "not compared to the cities back east. But there is something about this place, the space, the freedom, the way the land makes you earn everything you get. It gets into your blood." "I understand," Margot said softly, and she did. Despite growing up here, she had never really appreciated the stark beauty of the desert until now. Maybe because she had always seen it through the lens of her father's resentment and her own misery. But now, looking at it with fresh eyes, seeing it the way Yates saw it, she understood its appeal. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Margot settled into a routine that felt more natural than anything in her previous life. She woke early to prepare breakfast, spent the day managing the household, cooking, cleaning, mending, preserving food from the vegetable garden she had coaxed back to life. In the evenings, she would prepare dinner and then spend time with Yates, talking or reading or simply enjoying companionable silence. The ranch hands, Charlie, Tom, and old Miguel, treated her like a favorite niece, protective and respectful. They made sure she knew she was valued, complimenting her cooking, thanking her for mended shirts, treating her presence as a natural and positive addition to the ranch. But it was Yates who occupied more and more of Margot's thoughts. She found herself watching for him during the day, listening for the sound of his horse returning. Found herself taking extra care with her appearance in the evenings, brushing out her hair and pinching her cheeks for color. Found herself lying awake at night, thinking about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh, the gentle strength in his hands. She tried to tell herself it was simply gratitude, natural affection for someone who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. But she knew it was more than that. She was falling in love with Yates Kellerman, and the realization terrified her. Because she was still Margot Daniels, the daughter no one wanted, the burden, the woman her own father could not value enough to treat with basic decency. What made her think someone like Yates, capable and strong and good, would ever see her as anything more than an employee, a temporary solution to a household problem? The thought that had whispered through her mind that first night returned now, louder and more insistent. She would never be someone prized, never be someone treasured. She was useful, perhaps, adequate, but never special, never valued beyond her practical contributions. October gave way to November. The weather turned cooler, bringing frosts that silvered the desert in the mornings. Yates began talking about moving the cattle to winter pasture, a major undertaking that would require several days of hard work. "I will be gone for about 5 days," he told Margot one evening. "Taking the herd to the winter range. Charlie and Tom will go with me. Miguel will stay here, keep an eye on things." Margot nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest at the thought of Yates being gone for so long. "I will make sure you have plenty of food packed, and Miguel and I will manage fine here." The day Yates left, Margot watched him ride out with the hands and the cattle, dust rising in a great cloud behind the herd. She stood on the porch long after they had disappeared from view, feeling foolish for the ache in her heart. Miguel found her there. The old vaquero had worked for Yates's father and stayed on after both parents died. He was somewhere past 60, weathered as old leather, with kind eyes that saw more than most people realized. "You care for him," Miguel said simply. It was not a question. Margot felt her cheeks heat. "He has been very kind to me. He is a good man. The best I have known. He deserves someone who sees his worth." "I agree," Margot said softly. Miguel studied her for a long moment. "You know he cares for you too, yes?" Margot's heart jumped, but she shook her head. "He is kind to everyone." "It does not mean anything special." "Señorita, I have known Yates since he was a boy. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Never seen him talk the way he talks when you are around. Never seen him hurry through his work to get back to the house at a reasonable hour." These things mean something. Margot wanted to believe him, but the old fears, the old certainty of her own unworthiness held her back. "Even if that were true, I am not the kind of woman a man like Yates should want. I come with nothing. I am estranged from my family. I have no prospects, no dowry, nothing to offer." Miguel made a dismissive sound. "You think Yates cares about such things. He cares about character, about kindness, about strength of spirit, and you have all of those in abundance." Before Margot could respond, Miguel tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her alone with her tumbling thoughts. The 5 days passed slowly. Margot kept busy with her usual tasks, but the house felt empty without Yates's presence. She found herself missing the smallest things: the sound of his boots on the porch, his voice calling out a greeting when he came in, the way he always thanked her for meals as if each one was a gift rather than simply her job. On the 5th evening, just as the sun was setting, Margot heard horses approaching. She stepped out onto the porch, her heart lifting when she saw Yates riding up with Charlie and Tom flanking him. They all looked exhausted, covered in trail dust, but Yates's face lit up when he saw her. "Welcome back," Margot called, trying to keep her voice casual despite the joy flooding through her. "I have supper ready whenever you are hungry." "Give me 20 minutes to clean up," Yates said, dismounting with a slight grimace that suggested sore muscles. "I have been dreaming about your cooking for 5 days straight." The ranch hands went to clean up at the bunkhouse, while Yates used the washroom off the kitchen. Margot busied herself setting out food, her nerves suddenly jangling. Why did Miguel's words keep echoing in her head? Why did she feel like something fundamental had shifted while Yates was gone? When he emerged, damp-haired and changed into clean clothes, Margot had to look away from the warmth in his eyes. They sat down to eat, and Yates began telling her about the cattle drive, the challenges they had faced, a small stampede averted, a river crossing that had gone better than expected. "I am glad it went well," Margot said when he finished, "and I am glad you are back safe." Something in her voice must have betrayed more than she intended, because Yates went very still. He set down his fork and looked at her directly, his gray eyes intense. "I missed you," he said quietly. "The whole time I was gone, I kept thinking about getting back here, back to you." Margot's breath caught. "Yates, I know this is complicated," he continued. "I know you work for me, and that creates a power imbalance. I know you came here seeking refuge, and the last thing I want is to make you uncomfortable. But Margot, I have to be honest with you. What I feel for you, it is not gratitude or appreciation for a good employee. It is more than that." Much more. Margot felt tears prick her eyes. Everything she wanted was right here being offered to her, but the old fears rose up like specters. How can you? I am not Yates. You do not understand. I'm not someone who gets chosen. I'm not someone who gets treasured. My own father could not even stand to keep me around. What makes you think I am worth wanting? Yates stood up and moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. He took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. Margot, listen to me. Your father was a fool, a blind, bitter fool who could not see what was right in front of him. But I see you. I see your strength, your kindness, your intelligence, your courage. I see the way you transformed this house from a place I slept into a home. I see the way you care for everyone around you. I see the way you tackle problems instead of running from them, and I treasure all of it. I treasure you. But I have nothing, Margot whispered. No family, no money, no. You have yourself. That is everything. Margot, I do not need you to bring wealth or connections or social standing. I need you to be exactly who you are. The woman who makes me laugh. The woman who challenges my opinions and makes me think. The woman who has made every day better since she arrived. That woman is worth more to me than all the cattle and land in the territory. Margot looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity, nothing but honest emotion. And something inside her, that hard knot of unworthiness that had been there for as long as she could remember, began to crack. I was so afraid, she admitted. Afraid that what I feel for you was just desperation or gratitude, but it is not. Yates, I think about you constantly. I watch for you during the day. I save up things to tell you at supper. When you were gone this week, the house felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with anyone else being here. It felt empty because you were not here. Yates smiled, that brilliant flash of warmth that never failed to make her heart skip. Then we are in agreement. We care for each other. The question is, what do we do about it? Margot felt a laugh bubble up, part joy and part residual nervousness. That is a very practical way to put it. I am a practical man, Yates said, his smile widening. But since you want romance, let me try again. He squeezed her hands gently. Margot Daniels, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You have brought light and warmth and joy into my life. Every day with you is better than the day before. I want to keep having those days. I want to wake up knowing you are here. I want to come home to you every evening. I want to build a future with you, not as employer and employee, but as partners, as husband and wife. Margot's eyes widened. Are you proposing? I suppose I am, Yates said. Though perhaps I should have planned it better, waited for a more romantic moment, but I do not want to wait. I do not want you to have any doubt about my intentions or my feelings. I love you, Margot. And I want to marry you if you will have me. If I will have you. Margot felt the tears spill over now, but they were tears of joy. Yates, I love you too. I have been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. But yes, I will marry you. I want nothing more than to spend my life with you. Yates stood and pulled her up with him, drawing her into his arms. For a long moment, they simply held each other, the warmth of their embrace speaking what words could not quite capture. Then Yates drew back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. May I kiss you? He asked softly. In answer, Margot rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened as 20 years of loneliness and weeks of growing love found expression. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, and Yates was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know how valued you are, he murmured against her hair. How treasured, how loved. You will never doubt your worth again, Margot. I promise you that. Margot buried her face against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her cheek. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally, spiritually safe. Safe to be herself, to be loved for who she was rather than who she could never be. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, drunk on happiness and the newness of being able to speak freely about their feelings. Yates wanted to get married as soon as possible, but Margot insisted they should wait at least a few weeks to do things properly. People already might talk about me living here, she pointed out. If we get married immediately, they will definitely talk. I do not want there to be any scandal attached to our marriage. I do not care what people think, Yates said stubbornly. But I do. Not because I am ashamed, but because I do not want anything to tarnish this. I want everything to be right and proper. Please, Yates. Give me a few weeks to make arrangements, to get a proper dress, to do this the right way. Yates sighed but agreed. 4 weeks, but not a day longer. I have waited long enough to make you my wife. The next morning they broke the news to Miguel and the other ranch hands. Miguel just grinned, looking entirely unsurprised. Charlie and Tom offered enthusiastic congratulations, clearly pleased for their boss. About time, Tom said, clapping Yates on the shoulder. We have been taking bets on how long it would take you to work up the courage to speak up. Yates laughed. That obvious, was it? Only to everyone with eyes, Charlie chimed in. He turned to Margot. And we are glad for it, miss. You have made this place better, and you have made Yates happier than we have ever seen him. That is worth celebrating. They rode into town that afternoon, Yates and Margot, ostensibly to buy supplies but really to share their news and begin making arrangements. Truth or Consequences was small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other businesses. But it was the center of the local community, and word spread quickly. The preacher, Reverend Martin, was a jovial man in his 50s who seemed delighted by their news. Yates, I am thrilled for you, and Miss Daniels, welcome to our community. When would you like the ceremony? They settled on 4 weeks from that Saturday, giving Margot time to prepare and allowing word to spread to the scattered ranches and homesteads in the area. The general store owner's wife, a warm woman named Martha who immediately took Margot under her wing, offered to help with dress preparations and wedding arrangements. We do not get many weddings out here, Martha said as she showed Margot fabric samples. And Yates is well liked. People will want to celebrate with you. As they prepared to leave town, loaded with supplies and plans, Margot felt a shadow cross her happiness. Yates, she said quietly, what if my father hears about the wedding? What if he comes? Yates's expression hardened slightly. Do you want him there? No, Margot said immediately. Then, more thoughtfully, or maybe yes, but not because I want his approval, because I want him to see that I did have value, that someone did prize me enough to want to marry me. Is that petty? It is human, Yates said, but Margot, you do not need his validation. You never did. Your worth is not determined by whether he recognizes it. I know, but still. If he shows up, we will deal with it, Yates said firmly. But I will not have him disrupting our day or making you feel small. This is about us, about our future. Nothing else matters. The next 4 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Margot worked with Martha to create a wedding dress, simple but beautiful, made of cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She cleaned the ranch house until it shone, preparing for the small reception they planned to hold there after the ceremony. She cooked and preserved food, wanting to have plenty to offer their guests. Yates, meanwhile, threw himself into ranch work with renewed energy. He repaired the corrals, painted the barn, made sure everything was in perfect order. In the evenings, he and Margot would steal time together, sitting on the porch or taking walks around the property, talking about their dreams for the future. I want children, Yates said one evening. A whole house full of them if we are blessed. I want to fill this place with noise and laughter and life." "I want that too," Margot said softly, "though the thought terrifies me a bit. My mother died in childbirth, and my father always made me feel like I had killed her by being born." Yates took her hand. "Your mother's death was tragic, but it was not your fault, and medical care is better now than it was 20 years ago. We will make sure you have the best care possible. But Margot, even if we are not blessed with children, you are enough. You will always be enough." Those words, spoken with such conviction, made Margot's eyes sting with tears. She was learning to believe him, learning to accept that she truly was valued, truly was treasured. But years of believing otherwise did not disappear overnight. She caught herself sometimes, falling into old patterns of thinking, assuming she was in the way or not good enough. Each time, Yates seemed to sense it, and he would find some way to show her, through words or actions, that she mattered. The week before the wedding, Margot received an unexpected visitor. She was in the garden, harvesting the last of the autumn vegetables, when she heard a horse approach. Looking up, she saw a woman about her age, dressed in fine riding clothes with blonde hair and sharp features. "Can I help you?" Margot asked, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. "You must be Margot Daniels," the woman said, her voice cool. "I am Felicity Cooper. My family owns the ranch east of here." "Pleased to meet you," Margot said, though something in the woman's tone put her on guard. Felicity dismounted, her movements practiced and elegant. "I heard about your upcoming nuptials to Yates Kellerman. I thought I should come introduce myself." "That is kind of you," Margot said carefully. "Is it?" Felicity laughed, a brittle sound. "I suppose I should be honest. I am here because I cannot quite believe it. Yates Kellerman, one of the most eligible men in the territory, marrying a woman who appeared out of nowhere. A woman with no family, no background, nothing to recommend her. Surely you can understand my surprise." Margot felt her cheeks heat with anger and embarrassment. "I understand that you are being deliberately rude. If you have something to say, please say it plainly and then leave." "Very well. I am saying that I find this entire situation suspicious. Yates is a good man, a wealthy man. He could have his pick of women. Instead, he chooses someone who showed up with literally nothing. It makes one wonder what hold you have over him, what you did to trap him." "I did not trap anyone," Margot said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Yates asked me to marry him of his own free will, and my past or my family situation is none of your concern." "It is my concern when it affects the community," Felicity shot back. "We look after our own out here, and Yates is one of us. You are not. You are an interloper, probably after his money, and I intend to make sure everyone knows it." Before Margot could respond, Yates's voice cut across the yard. "That is enough, Felicity." Both women turned to see Yates striding toward them, his expression thunderous. He must have been in the barn and heard the raised voices. "Yates," Felicity said, her tone immediately softening, becoming almost coquettish. "I was just trying to look out for your interests. By insulting my fiancé, by coming onto my property and making baseless accusations." Yates stopped beside Margot, his body language protective. "Let me be very clear, Felicity. Who I choose to marry is my business and mine alone. Margot has brought nothing but joy and light to my life. She has earned her place here through hard work, kindness, and strength of character. She does not need money or family connections to have value, and if you cannot see that, then I question your judgment, not hers." Felicity's face flushed red. "You are making a mistake. Everyone knows. Everyone knows that you have been angling for a proposal from me for 3 years, and I have never been interested," Yates said bluntly. "Is that what this is really about? Jealousy because I chose Margot instead of you? How dare you?" Felicity sputtered. I dare because you came to my home and attacked the woman I love. Now I suggest you leave. And Felicity, if I hear that you have been spreading rumors or saying anything to damage Margot's reputation, you will answer to me. You understand?" Felicity stared at him for a long moment, fury and humiliation warring on her face. Then she spun on her heel, mounted her horse with jerky movements, and galloped away without another word. Margot let out a long breath, feeling her knees go weak with delayed reaction. Yates immediately wrapped an arm around her waist, steadying her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle now. "Yes, no, I do not know." Margot pressed her face against his chest. "Is that what people think, that I trapped you, that I am only after your money?" "I do not care what people think," Yates said fiercely. "And most people do not think that. Felicity is bitter and jealous. She does not represent anyone but herself." "But she is right about one thing," Margot said quietly. "I did come here with nothing. I do not have family or connections. I cannot offer you anything except myself." Yates took her face in his hands, making her look at him. "Margot, listen to me. You are not nothing. You are everything. You are the woman I love, the woman I want to spend my life with. I do not need you to bring me wealth or status. I have those things. What I need, what I want is you, your laugh, your smile, your thoughts and opinions, your presence in my life. That is what matters. That is what I treasure." Margot felt tears spill over. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Because I mean it," Yates said simply. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips. "For more days, and you will be my wife. Nothing Felicity or anyone else says can change that." The confrontation with Felicity shook Margot more than she wanted to admit. That night she lay awake, old insecurities rising up like ghosts. What if Felicity was right? What if she was not good enough for Yates? What if he eventually regretted choosing her? The next morning she was quiet as she prepared breakfast. Yates noticed immediately. "You are still thinking about what Felicity said," he observed. "How can I not?" Margot replied. "She said what everyone is probably thinking, that I am beneath you, that I trapped you somehow." Yates set down his coffee cup with a definitive thunk. "Come with me." "What? Where?" "Just come." He led her out of the house and down to the barn, where he saddled 2 horses. They rode out into the morning, Yates leading them to a high point on his property that overlooked the entire ranch. The sun was just clearing the horizon, painting everything gold and crimson. "This land," Yates said, gesturing at the vista before them, "is what I have spent years building. Every fence post, every building, every head of cattle represents work and planning and sacrifice. It is valuable to me because of what it represents, what I have put into it." He turned to face Margot directly. "But it is still just land and livestock. It is not alive. It does not love me back. It does not make me laugh or challenge me to be better. It does not warm my heart when I see it or make me count the hours until I can return home. You do all of those things. So when you ask me to compare your value to material wealth, there is no comparison. You win. Every time. In every way." Margot felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Yates, I know you had a father who could not see your worth. I know that has left scars. But Margot, I am not your father. I see you, all of you, and I choose you. Not because you trapped me, not because I feel obligated, but because you are the most remarkable person I know, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." The early morning light caught the sincerity in his eyes, and Margot felt something shift inside her. Not just the surface acceptance of his words, but something deeper. A fundamental change in how she saw herself. Because if someone like Yates, honest and good and true, could see value in her, maybe it was really there. Maybe she had always been worth something, and the only person who could not see it was her father. "I love you," she said, the words coming from deep in her soul. And I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that choosing me was the right decision." "You already have," Yates said, pulling her close. "You already have." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, something settled and sure between them. The remaining days before the wedding passed quickly. More people from surrounding ranches came to introduce themselves and offer congratulations. Most were warm and welcoming, clearly happy for Yates. If anyone shared Felicity's opinions, they kept them to themselves. Martha and some other women from town came the day before the wedding to help with final preparations. They decorated the ranch house with wildflowers and pine boughs, set up tables for the reception, cooked dishes to supplement what Margot had already prepared. Their chatter and laughter filled the house, and Margot felt embraced by these women who were, in their way, welcoming her into the community. "Yates is a good man," Martha said as she and Margot arranged flowers. "His parents were good people, and they raised him right." "You are getting a fine husband." "I know," Margot said softly. "Sometimes I cannot quite believe this is real." "It is real," Martha assured her. "And everyone who knows Yates can see how happy he is. That is all that matters." That evening, following tradition, Margot stayed at Martha's house in town while Yates remained at the ranch. It felt strange to be separated after weeks of living under the same roof, but Martha insisted. "Just one night," the older woman said. "Tomorrow, you will have the rest of your lives together." Margot tried to sleep, but found herself too excited, too nervous, too overwhelmed by the enormity of what was about to happen. Tomorrow she would become Yates's wife. She would legally and spiritually bind herself to him and he to her. After 20 years of being unwanted, unloved, she would belong to someone and he would belong to her. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect November day that made the desert look almost welcoming. Martha helped Margot dress, fastening the tiny buttons up the back of her wedding gown, arranging her dark hair into an elegant twist. "You look beautiful," Martha said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Yates is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Margot replied. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at the small church. As Margot walked down the main street of Truth or Consequences, accompanied by Martha, she saw that what seemed like the entire community had turned out. Ranchers and their families, townspeople, even some of the cowboys from neighboring spreads, all there to witness her marriage to Yates Kellerman. The church was small and simple, plain wooden pews and whitewashed walls, but someone had filled it with flowers and candles flickered on the altar. Margot paused at the door, suddenly nervous. Then she saw Yates standing at the front and everything else faded away. He wore his best clothes, a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. But it was his face that captured her attention, the look of pure joy and love that transformed his normally serious features. He was looking at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, like she was precious beyond measure. Margot walked down the aisle alone, having no one to give her away. But she did not feel alone. She felt strong, sure, certain that she was walking toward her future, toward happiness, toward love. When she reached the front, Yates took her hands and she saw that his were shaking slightly. That small sign of nervousness, of how much this meant to him, made her love him even more. Reverend Martin began the ceremony, his voice warm and carrying easily through the small space. Margot heard the words as if from a distance, all her attention focused on Yates, on the way he was looking at her, on the feeling of his hands holding hers. When it came time for the vows, Yates spoke first. "I, Yates Kellerman, take you, Margot Daniels, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, cherish you, and treasure you for all the days of my life. I promise to see your value, your strength, and your beauty, and to make sure you never doubt any of them. I promise to build a life with you based on respect, partnership, and love. From this day forward, you will never be alone. You will never be unwanted. You will always be prized above all else." Margot's voice shook as she repeated her own vows. "I, Margot Daniels, take you, Yates Kellerman, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to honor you, support you, and love you for all the days of my life. I promise to build a home with you, to be your partner in all things. I promise to see the goodness in you and to reflect it back. From this day forward, you will have my heart, my loyalty, and my love freely given and never regretted." Reverend Martin smiled. "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Yates, you may kiss your bride." Yates stepped closer, cupping Margot's face in his hands with infinite gentleness. "Hello, wife," he murmured, and then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. The church erupted in applause and cheers. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. They turned to face their community, and Reverend Martin announced, "May I present Mr. and Mrs. Yates Kellerman." More cheers followed as they walked back down the aisle, this time together, bound together, no longer two separate people but partners committed to a shared future. Outside the church, people lined up to offer congratulations and well wishes. Hands to shake, embraces to receive, good wishes to acknowledge. Through it all, Yates kept Margot close, his arm around her waist, his body language making it clear to everyone that she was his and he was hers. And Margot felt something she had never felt before. She felt like she belonged. Not because of where she came from or what she could offer, but simply because she was loved. The reception at the ranch was everything Margot had hoped. Tables laden with food. Music from a fiddle player who lived in town. Dancing and laughter and celebration. The ranch hands had decorated the barn, stringing up lanterns that cast warm golden light as the sun set. Yates led Margot in the first dance, holding her close as they swayed to the music. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Margot replied honestly. "I keep thinking I will wake up and find this was all a dream. Not a dream, our life, our future." Yates pulled her closer, "And it is only going to get better." As the evening wore on, Margot found herself surrounded by well-wishers, women offering advice on married life, men clapping Yates on the shoulder and telling him he had done well, children running and playing, their laughter adding to the festive atmosphere. She was standing with Martha, watching the dancing, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Margot." She turned slowly, her heart suddenly pounding. Her father stood a few feet away, hat in hand, looking older than she remembered. Beside him was Gerald Patterson, the man her father had planned to sell her to. The joy of the evening evaporated, replaced by cold tension. Martha moved closer to Margot, her presence supportive and protective. "Father," Margot said, her voice carefully neutral, "I did not expect to see you here." "Heard in town that you were getting married," her father said. His eyes traveled over her wedding dress, the decorated barn, the assembled guests. "Done quite well for yourself, it seems." "She has done extraordinarily well," Yates said, appearing at Margot's side. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "My wife is an exceptional woman." "Your wife," Gerald Patterson said, his lip curling, "could have been mine if she had not run off like a thief in the night." "Could have been yours if I had sold her to you, you mean," Margot's father corrected absently. Then, seeming to realize how that sounded, he added, "I came to see if we might reconcile. You are still my daughter after all." Margot felt Yates tense beside her, but she laid a hand on his arm. This was her fight. "Why now? Why come here on my wedding day?" Her father shifted uncomfortably. "A man can have regrets, can want to make amends with his only child." "That is not an answer," Margot said quietly, "but I think I can guess. You heard that I married well. That Yates is a successful rancher, and you thought perhaps you could benefit from that connection, perhaps get some money or support from your newly prosperous daughter." Her father's face reddened. "That is not fair." "Is it not?" Margot felt a strange calm settle over her. For the first time in her life, she was looking at her father without fear or desperate hope for his approval. She saw him for what he was, a bitter, small man who had let grief turn him cruel. "You spent 20 years making me feel worthless. You called me a burden. You planned to marry me off to this man," she gestured at Patterson, "for money. And now, because my circumstances have improved, you want to be part of my life. No, father, that is not how this works." "I am your father," he said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "You are the man who sired me," Margot corrected. "But you were never truly a father to me. A father loves his child, values her, protects her. You did none of those things. So no, I will not reconcile with you. I will not pretend that we have a relationship worth salvaging. You made your choice 20 years ago. I have made mine now." She turned to Patterson. "As for you, I thank whatever providence kept me from becoming your wife. I hope you find someone who actually wants to marry you, though I suspect that is unlikely given your reputation." Patterson's face twisted with anger, but before he could respond, Yates stepped forward. "You both need to leave. Now. This is private property and you are not welcome here." "You cannot throw out her own father," Patterson blustered. "I can and I will. Margot has made her wishes clear. If you do not leave immediately, I will have my men escort you off the property. Your choice." Charlie and Tom had appeared, flanking Yates, their presence making it clear they would back up their boss's threat if necessary. After a tense moment, Margot's father turned and walked toward their horses, Patterson following with muttered curses. Margot watched them go, expecting to feel sadness or regret. Instead, she felt liberation. She had stood up to her father, had refused to let him manipulate her or make her feel small. She had chosen herself, chosen her new life, chosen love over obligation. "Are you all right?" Yates asked softly once they were gone. "Yes," Margot said, surprised to find she meant it. "Actually, I am better than all right. I think I needed that, needed to finally tell him how I felt, needed to choose myself." Yates pulled her into his arms. "I am so proud of you. That took incredible courage." "I learned it from you," Margot said, resting her head against his chest. "You showed me that I have value, that I deserve to be treated with respect. Without that, I never could have stood up to him." The confrontation had drawn attention, and several guests approached to offer support. Martha hugged Margot fiercely. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "Do not let him poison this beautiful day." And he did not. After a few minutes, the music started again and the celebration resumed. Margot danced with Yates, with the ranch hands, with men from neighboring ranches who offered kindness and welcome. She laughed and ate and felt herself surrounded by community, by people who accepted her, who valued her presence. Later, when the guests had finally departed and they had the ranch to themselves, Yates led Margot into the house. It felt different now, not just a place where she worked, but her home. Their home. In the bedroom that was now theirs to share, Yates was gentle and patient, treating Margot with a tenderness that made her heart ache. They came together as husband and wife, and it was everything she had hoped, passionate and sweet and right. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Yates's arms around her, Margot felt a peace she had never known. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Yates asked, his breath warm against her hair. "For seeing me, for valuing me, for loving me when I could not love myself, for showing me that I was worth something." "You were always worth everything," Yates said firmly. "I just made sure you knew it, and Margot, I will spend every day of our marriage making sure you never forget." You are prized above all else. Today, tomorrow, always. The months that followed were the happiest of Margot's life. She settled into married life with an ease that surprised her. The ranch work continued, but now she was mistress of the house rather than employee, a subtle but significant difference. Yates consulted her on decisions, valued her opinions, treated her as a true partner. Winter came, bringing cold nights and occasional snow that transformed the desert into something magical. Margot and Yates would sit by the fire in the evenings, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. He told her stories of his childhood, of his parents and their dreams for the ranch. She found herself able to talk about her own past without the sharp pain that had always accompanied those memories. "I used to think my father was right," she admitted one evening. "That I was somehow defective, unlovable, that if my own father could not care for me, no one ever would. He was a damaged man who took his pain out on an innocent child," Yates said. "That was his failure, not yours. I know that now. But it took loving you and being loved by you to really understand it. You gave me back to myself, Yates." He kissed her forehead. "You gave me a reason to come home every day, a reason to build something beyond just a profitable ranch. You gave me a family." In February, Margot realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She waited until she was certain before telling Yates, worried about his reaction given what had happened to her mother. But when she finally worked up the courage to share the news, Yates responded with pure delight. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then immediately set her down with exaggerated care. "Should you be standing? Should you be resting? What do you need?" Margot laughed at his concern. "I am pregnant, not ill. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. But you are not just any woman. You are my woman, and I will make sure you have every care, every comfort." He was as good as his word. As Margot's pregnancy progressed, Yates hovered attentively, making sure she did not overwork herself, bringing in a girl from town to help with the heavier housework. He accompanied her to every appointment with the doctor in Las Cruces, a day's journey that he made willingly despite the disruption to ranch work. The doctor, an experienced older man, examined Margot thoroughly and pronounced her healthy and strong. "No reason to expect complications," he told them. "You are young and fit. Just take reasonable precautions, and I expect you will deliver a healthy child this autumn." Margot bloomed with pregnancy, her happiness evident to everyone around her. The ranch hands treated her like precious cargo, jumping to help with anything heavy. Martha and the other women from town visited regularly, bringing baby clothes they had made and offering advice. Even Felicity Cooper, whom Margot had not seen since before the wedding, appeared one day with a gift, a beautifully knitted baby blanket. "I wanted to apologize," Felicity said stiffly. "I was cruel and jealous, and I am ashamed of how I behaved. You have been nothing but kind to everyone, and you have made Yates happier than I have ever seen him. I hope you can forgive me." Margot was surprised but touched by the gesture. "Of course I forgive you. We all make mistakes when we are hurting." Felicity's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "You are very gracious. I hope we can be friends, or at least friendly neighbors." "I would like that," Margot said honestly. Summer passed into autumn. Margot grew large with child, moving more slowly but still insisting on managing most of the household. Yates became increasingly anxious as her due date approached, checking on her constantly, starting at every sound. "You are going to worry yourself into an early grave," Margot told him one evening, amused by his hovering. "I cannot help it. I love you too much to be calm about this. Women have babies every day, Yates, but none of them are you." In late October, Margot's labor began. Yates immediately rode to town to fetch the doctor and Martha, then stayed by Margot's side, holding her hand through the contractions. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the next day. There were moments when Margot could see the fear in Yates's eyes, could feel his grip on her hand tighten until his knuckles turned white. But finally, as dawn broke on their son's birthday, the baby entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to everyone in the house. The doctor placed the squirming infant in Margot's arms, and she looked down at his red face and dark hair and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "A son," Yates breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "We have a son." "A healthy son," the doctor confirmed. 10 fingers, 10 toes, good strong lungs. Congratulations. After the doctor and Martha had cleaned everything up and ensured both mother and baby were well, they left Margot and Yates alone with their new son. Yates sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Margot and one hand gently touching the baby's head with something like awe. "He is perfect," Yates said softly. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Margot asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at their son, Margot knew exactly what felt right. "James," she said. "James Daniel Kellerman, after my mother Daniels. I think she would have loved to meet him." Yates smiled. "James Daniel Kellerman, I like it, Jamie for short." Jamie proved to be a demanding baby, waking frequently to nurse and requiring constant attention. But Margot had never been happier. She marveled at this tiny person, this proof of her and Yates's love. And watching Yates with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed, made her fall in love with him all over again. Yates was a devoted father from the start. He would walk the floor with Jamie when the baby was fussy, sing to him in a surprisingly pleasant voice, change diapers without complaint. He included Jamie in ranch work as soon as feasible, carrying the baby in a sling while he checked on cattle or repaired fences. "I want him to know this land," Yates explained. "Want him to love it the way I do. This will all be his someday." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Jamie grew from infant to toddler to little boy, sturdy and curious and full of life. When he was 3, Margot became pregnant again. This time she was less anxious, more confident. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in the spring she delivered a daughter they named Sarah Rose. Sarah was different from her brother, quieter, more observant, with Margot's dark eyes and Yates's determined chin. Jamie adored his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her, bringing her toys, entertaining her with silly faces. 2 years later, another son arrived, Michael Thomas, completing their family. The ranch house that had once felt too large now felt perfectly sized, filled with the noise and chaos of 3 young children. Margot sometimes stopped in the middle of her busy days, looking around at the life she had built, and could scarcely believe it was real. The scared young woman who had walked away from her father's ranch 7 years ago would not recognize the confident mother and wife she had become. The ranch prospered under Yates's management. He expanded the operation, adding more cattle, improving the horse breeding program. He built a new barn and a second bunkhouse to accommodate additional hands. The Kellerman Ranch became known as one of the best-run operations in the territory. But Yates never let work consume him the way some ranchers did. Family came first always. He made time for his children, teaching them to ride, to understand the land, to value hard work. He made time for Margot, ensuring they had evenings together after the children were in bed, moments to reconnect and remember they were not just parents, but lovers and partners. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Yates told Margot one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. 10 years of marriage and 3 children had left marks on her body, but his eyes held nothing but love and desire when he looked at her. "You are biased," Margot said, but she leaned into him, enjoying the solid warmth of his presence. "I am honest," Yates corrected. "You are beautiful, strong, capable, everything I could ever want. I fall in love with you more every day. Even when I am covered in flour and chasing children and completely exhausted. Especially then," Yates said firmly. He turned her face toward his and kissed her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding day. Especially then. When Jamie turned 10, Yates decided it was time to teach him more serious ranch work. The boy was thrilled, proud to be trusted with greater responsibility. Margot watched her son ride out with his father, sitting tall in the saddle, and felt a bittersweet pride. He was growing up, becoming his own person. "They grow so fast," Martha said. She still visited regularly, having become not just a friend but almost a second mother to Margot. "Seems like yesterday you were arriving in town for the first time." 11 years, Margot said softly. 11 years since I left my father's ranch with nothing but the clothes on my back. Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed. You built a good life. You and Yates both. Those children are blessed to have you as parents." Margot thought about her own childhood, about the coldness and rejection she had endured. "I never want them to doubt that they are loved, never want them to wonder if they are valued or wanted. They should always know they are treasured." "They do know," Martha assured her. "Anyone who sees your family can see the love there. You have broken the cycle, Margot. You have given your children what you never had." That evening, after the children were in bed, Margot told Yates about the conversation. "Do you think I am a good mother? I worry sometimes that I do not know how, that I am just guessing at what a parent should be." Yates pulled her close. "You are an excellent mother. Our children are happy, confident, secure. They know they are loved unconditionally. That is the greatest gift any parent can give." "I had no example to follow," Margot said quietly. "My father showed me what not to do, but that is not the same as knowing what to do." "You are guided by love," Yates said simply. "That is enough. More than enough. Our children will grow up knowing they are valued, that they matter, that they are prized, because that is what you show them every single day." More years passed. Jamie grew into a capable young man, taking on more and more responsibility on the ranch. Sarah proved to have a gift with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals. Michael was the scholar of the family, always rating, endlessly curious about how things worked. Margot and Yates watched their children develop into individuals, guided them through challenges, celebrated their victories. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most respected operations in New Mexico territory. When New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, the Kellermans celebrated along with their neighbors. Jamie was 22 by then, a man in his own right, already managing significant portions of the ranch operation. Sarah was 19, being courted by the son of a neighboring rancher. Michael was 17, talking about going to university to study engineering. "We are getting old," Margot said to Yates one evening. She was 54 now, her dark hair liberally streaked with silver. Yates was 59, still strong but moving a bit more stiffly after days in the saddle. "We are aging gracefully," Yates corrected. "And I would not change a single moment of it. Every year with you has been a gift. Even the hard years. When the drought almost ruined us. When Jamie broke his arm falling from the barn. When Sarah was so ill with fever we thought we might lose her. Even those," Yates said firmly. "Because we faced them together, because our love was strong enough to carry us through." "Margot, do you remember what you said that first night? That you would never be someone who was prized?" "I remember," Margot said softly. "You were wrong." You have always been prized. From the moment I met you, you have been the most valuable thing in my life. Our children, our ranch, our entire life together, it all flows from you. You are the heart of this family. My heart." Margot felt tears sting her eyes. After 34 years of marriage, he could still move her to tears with his words. "I love you, Yates Kellerman, more than I can ever adequately express." "I know," Yates said, pulling her close, "because I feel the same way, and I will feel that way for whatever time we have left. Whether that is 1 year or 30 more." They were blessed with many more years, years that saw all 3 children marry and start families of their own. Years that brought grandchildren, 7 in total, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter again. Years of watching the land they loved continue to thrive and prosper. Jamie took over the main ranch operation, proving himself a worthy successor to his father. Sarah and her husband established their own smaller ranch nearby, focusing on horse breeding. Michael surprised everyone by returning after university and opening a general store in Truth or Consequences, using his engineering skills to modernize the town's infrastructure. Margot delighted in her role as grandmother, spoiling her grandchildren in the way grandmothers were entitled to. She taught the girls to cook and sew, the boys to read and appreciate beauty. She told them stories of the old days, of how their grandparents had met, of the hard work and love that had built everything they knew. "Tell us again about when you met Grandpa," the youngest grandchild, a girl named Emma, would beg, and Margot would tell the story, leaving out the darker parts but keeping the essential truth. "I was lost, and he found me. I did not know my own value, and he showed me. He taught me that love is not something you have to earn. It is something freely given by the right person, and he has been the right person for me every day since." Yates's health began to decline when he was 82. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. He spent more time in a chair on the porch, less time on horseback. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Margot never wavered. "I have had a good life," he told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset together, as they had done thousands of times before. "A better life than I ever imagined possible, and that is because of you." "Because of us," Margot corrected, taking his hand. Her own hands were gnarled with age now, spotted and lined. But when Yates held them, she still felt young, still felt beautiful, still felt prized. "Yes," Yates agreed, "because of us, because we chose each other, because we built something lasting." He lived another 3 years, passing peacefully in his sleep at 85. Margot, who was 81, held his hand through that final night, talking to him, reminding him of their life together, thanking him for everything he had given her. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the state. Yates had been respected and liked, known for his integrity and generosity. People came from hundreds of miles away to pay their respects, but it was Margot's eulogy that had everyone in tears. She stood at the front of the church, her voice still strong despite her age, and talked about the man she had loved for more than 5 decades. "Yates Kellerman saved my life," she said simply. "Not just that first night when he protected me from danger, but every day after. He saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. He loved me when I did not know how to be loved. He showed me through word and deed, through 53 years of marriage, that I was prized above all else. And in doing so, he gave me the strength to become the woman I was meant to be." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. "I hope all of you are lucky enough to find a love like ours, a love that is not about possession or convenience, but about truly seeing and valuing another person. That is what Yates gave me. That is his legacy." After Yates's death, Margot continued living on the ranch, now fully managed by Jamie and his family. She spent her days with her children and grandchildren, content in the life she had built. She worked in her garden, did needlework, wrote letters. But mostly she remembered. She remembered a scared young woman walking into the desert night with no plan and no hope. She remembered a stranger who appeared like Providence and offered help without expecting anything in return. She remembered falling in love slowly, learning to trust, learning to believe she had value. She remembered a wedding day where she had walked down the aisle alone but left with a partner. She remembered the birth of each child, the joy and fear mixed together. She remembered thousands of small moments, morning coffee together, evening conversations, hands held across the table. She remembered a man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had valued her when she felt worthless, who had prized her above all else for over 5 decades. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had been blessed beyond measure. Margot Kellerman passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 86, surrounded by 3 generations of family who loved her. They buried her next to Yates on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to go on forever. At the funeral, Jamie stood to speak about his mother. She taught us that where you come from does not determine where you end up, that love can heal the deepest wounds. That family is not just about blood, but about choice and commitment. She taught us to value ourselves and each other. And she taught us, through her example, that a life built on love is the richest life of all. The ranch continued to thrive under Jamie's management, and eventually his sons after him. The Kellerman name became synonymous with integrity and quality throughout New Mexico. But more than that, it became synonymous with love, with family, with the idea that every person has value if someone will just take the time to see it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the desert sage, people said you could feel the presence of Yates and Margot still there, watching over the land and the family they had built, their love a foundation that would last for generations. A testament to a woman who thought she would never be prized, and a man who prized her above all else, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that almost never happen at all.